So the number one thing we're going to talk about are some keys to making the best growth decisions. So the idea behind this conversation really is actually building a team right for you. You know, over time what we've seen is traditionally is that there's those people who are meant to build and to expand and to manage people and do all those things, and then there are people who just don't. So let's understand first of all what the definition of a team is. So basically anybody beyond yourself is what establishes a team. So 2 people up to 102 people or beyond, obviously, is what would constitute a team. And the idea is that it's because you require more than one person to deliver or execute certain tasks across the platform. So in thinking about real estate, what I like to always sort of bring up as a base model is I want you to think about our business as having 4 basic pillars. So the first pillar is marketing. The second pillar is going to be sales. The third pillar will be administration. And the fourth pillar will be client care. So if you kind of follow that generic model, what happens is you begin to realize that you need people and systems in place to look after each distinct division of your business. What happens typically as solo agents when we first begin is that we're doing everything. We are the chief cooks and bottle washers. And the problem is everything gets going and ramping up to the point where we can no longer efficiently look after the 4 pillars, and then something falls off. And that creates an outcome which usually for us is not good. So let's look at the 5 distinctive advantages of building a team. There's probably a ton more, but we're gonna get back to that. So first thing is, with a team, you have the ability to provide a higher level of service to more people. So again, depending on the kind of, let's say, client care services you want to provide, the kind of marketing you want to provide, the kind of reporting you want to provide, the kind of video work, all the things that go together with doing our job. The more people you have, the more hands on deck, if you will, the more services and things to perform you can actually accomplish. So it's like an efficiency model, right? So if you think of like a social services organization or anything that provides services to people, as you add in more services, you just need more hands. That's just the way it will work. So that's number 1. Number 2, it's an opportunity for us to leverage our time and expertise. So what do I mean by that? Well, again, when you are the chief cook and bottle washer, you are basically consuming all of your own time and your own expertise to your best of your ability. And that has its own limitations. When you bring on teammates, the idea is to put them in a position where the members of the team are now working within their sweet spots, which means you can work on dollar productive activities while a teammate is working on something that's even lower than your dollar per hour value, but still needs to get done. Equally as important, but everybody has their role. The other thing is, if you happen to be a specialist in listing presentations, that's your domain. If you have someone on the team who's a specialist in IT or social media work, now you've got somebody who can do that, instead of us trying to figure it all out and wasting time and obviously being less efficient. The third thing you can see is to increase your income potential. Now that seems rather obvious. The challenge with it I've seen so far over the last little while that I've been coaching and going through it personally in terms of the growth of a team is that sometimes you believe that just by adding more people, you're going to add more income. Well, the reality is that that may be true, again, as long as people's efficiencies are certainly in place, but the opposite can be true. And we'll get into that in a little bit about expenses and management, but the real deal is the intention is to be so efficient that you attract more business because you're delivering more services, you generate more revenue. And as that wheel continues to spin and you attract more and more business, you can see how that wheel begins to expand and grow. Number 4, to build something of value that is potentially saleable and scalable. I always find this one interesting. You know, when you systemize a business, the nice thing about it is that there is some predictability. So when you have a predictable process, which then leads to a predictable outcome, you now have a model of something that you can sell. You also have now a model of something that you can make bigger to be worth more. So the idea of building it with some structure and with some purpose to it is in fact that you can grow it to a point that when you turn to the next person who you want to sell your business to, you can say, if you follow my procedures manual and execute these tasks of X, Y, and Z with this frequency and this mechanism and that piece of technology, here's the results that will come. You can now begin to think about evaluating your businesses for sale. Because typically, what do we see in our industry when people sort of wind down, if you will, with their career? Is because they've never treated it like a business. They just peter out. Or they hope that somebody comes to buy their database or merges it and collects a referral fee down the road or whatever their succession plan is. But if they built it at the beginning to be systemized and very deliberate that way, now they've got something that they can sell. And the last point that I'll bring up in terms of the advantage of building a team is to build a foundation for future succession plans. So typically, again, like we talked about, is that, establishing very distinctive roles within your company with the power to have documented tasks, a series of routines, and the ability to cross-train people in other positions will allow that to then see the enterprise transition into somebody else's hands down the road because the processes are consistent. The processes are documented. If you think about McDonald's, good, bad, or ugly example, their processes are consistent. So they can work their numbers based on their model to say, we know how to build the hamburgers and the McChickens and the fries. I'm getting hungry. But the point of the matter is that when you buy a McDonald's franchise, you know your numbers. How many people come through the door, given the processes we have in place, spits out this end result. And when you know that model, you now have a valuation and you can sell. Same thing for real estate. Succession is a big thing. For example, I may want to bring in my son or somebody into the family fold, cross-train them across all positions. They can step into the situation and the succession plan is complete. Does that kind of make sense to everybody? Okay, cool. Can you guys hear me okay? Can you just put up your hand to make sure that you can hear me? Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, want to make sure we're just checking in. Okay, now, alongside the benefits, let's talk about the potential pitfalls. Because I'm sure that some of you who either have teams or have heard of other people with teams have heard all the good parts and also the bad parts. So potential pitfalls, well, let's talk about the first and the biggest one, which would be financial. When you run a team, there is significant risk. The reason I say that is because you build out a system which requires you to build a machine. Then you have a financial obligation to feed the machine. And with teammates, you're responsible for their well-being. You're responsible for the delivery of services. Your delivery for the existence of the entire thing. And when pieces of the team tend to fall down or fall off or quit or leave, you are still holding the same size financial bag. Now that can be kind of scary because if you've heard of mega teams where they've got 50 agents or you've got 30 agents, it doesn't really matter. They've got massive overhead and monthly expenses. So the real conversation we're having is perhaps having a look at your own financial risk tolerances. It's one thing to move from one and then move into two, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But to think about progression and a build-out requires us to be very conscious about our financial obligations, obviously our overhead. Okay, number two. Not having full control and learning to delegate. So this is a classic. So typically when people get into the business, what we find, as I mentioned, is that we do everything. We are the chief, the cook, the bottle washer, the marketing department, the accounting department, like we do the whole deal. And what happens is we begin to believe that it can't be done by anyone else. Or we say things like, well, in the time it takes me to explain it to this person, I could have done it on my own. Or that person just doesn't do it as good as I want or as well as I do, so I'm just going to look after it. So the problem is over time is that we put those duties on ourselves. They become like our second skin. And we do them automatically. And most of those things are done from up here. So here's the challenge. Now you want to bring on a team, and let's just say you bring on an administrator or an executive assistant. And now you want to give them some of those tasks. The challenge is that we have a problem with not having control. It takes massive effort, focus, and intention to let go. And I heard one time, sometimes it's the saying is you need to slow down to go fast. Because if you just run through things and run through things and run through things, the challenge is you may think you're getting through everything. It doesn't mean that we're doing it well. And sometimes the person that you want to give it to can actually do it better than you. So the talent in all this and the learning in all this is to learn how to delegate with freedom. Let them become the champion of the new system. Let them become the champion of the new process, of the new step, of the new product, of the new project. It doesn't matter. The last thing I'll mention from a pitfall perspective is the potential to create your own competitors. So let's face it, this is another one of those situations where we've heard it to say, you know, I spent hours, days, weeks, months training these people, and look what they did to me. They packed up and they left, and they took my systems, and now he's doing it over there, or she's doing it over there. You know, that's just part of the risk you take on when you build out. Because like I mentioned earlier, you know, when you can systemize everything, so it's a step-by-step basis, like a playbook. Yes, the risk is that someone could take that playbook and take it across the field and play your own offense against you or your own defense against you, and away you go. That is a legitimate potential risk. So in the face of that risk, part of the challenge then becomes, why don't we think about how we can create the loyalty and the buy-in and the value proposition that we have as team leaders and as we have as a team, so that people want to stay, not that they want to pack up and take off. Does that make sense? Okay. So how do you know it's time to get going in terms of growth? Well, personally speaking, I can tell you it came from an absolute temper tantrum and we'll call it a breakdown. Now, maybe some of you guys who have been doing this for a little while have had a very busy 2020 in all of its glory in terms of, you know, running around and how many transactions you did and how many people you served. Well, I think what begins to happen, and number one on the list, is drop balls. So this is just the beginning of the erosion of you as chief cook and bottle washer. So what happens with drop balls, the title is obvious, is that you get going in so many different angles, in so many different directions, with so many different chores and people, but the problem is you just can't keep up. You got showings, you got listings, you got write-ups, you got pictures, you got advertising, you got marketing, you got social media posts. I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes you forget what your job is. You know, at least that's what I found, is that you just got so many fingers and so many things, and you're really doing none of them well. So that's the first thing, is you start to drop balls, okay? Number two is that significant or important details begin to fall between the cracks. So sometimes, you know, transactionally, we have conditions in our offers, but there's also sometimes built into an agreement, as an example, you've got requirements. So not conditions, but requirements. Survey has to be done by this date. Water samples have to be done by that date. Septic pump outs have to be done by that date. Oh yeah, my ad is due on Friday for my office. My thing for social media. Oh, my marketing guy. So what happens is the details are all over the place, right? So you're always feeling like you're behind. And that's one of the very, very difficult situations to find yourself in, is that when you wake up in the morning, you want to be motivated that you've got something to go to, that the machine is moving in the right direction, the people are all engaged. But when you're doing it and you're not doing it in that efficiency, then you feel like you're sort of chasing behind the day all day. Does anybody ever feel like that? Anybody feel like they're just running around like nonstop? Yeah, it's crazy, right? Totally contradictory to why we got into this in the first place. So number three is this state of constant overwhelm. Now, one of the things that triggered for me years ago, and as Rich said, I've been doing this for almost 30 years now in terms of selling, was that I just couldn't seem to escape that feeling of not being ever done. You know, I'd get home, I'd be exhausted mentally and physically. I'd sit down for dinner, but my phone would be going. Or the vibration of my phone would be going. Same difference, right? I would go to bed with 1,000 things on my head, but I would collapse because it was just too exhausting. I'd wake up in the morning thinking, oh my God, what do I need to do today? And hope to God I could remember everything. So as teams, the idea is to put people in positions so that those things begin to minimize, and therefore your feelings of overwhelm will follow. Because we're not going to be all that productive when we're feeling overwhelmed. At least I can speak for myself. It does not work for me, right? And the last thing I'll mention is calls or leads which are not being followed up with any consistency. And this brings us to the conversation we've heard before about the heartbeat of real estate. So you know that we go peaks and valleys all the time. Most people go peaks and valleys. We get really, really busy, and then we get tired, and we kind of rest. And then we get really, really busy, and we get tired, and then we rest. But what happens is during the busiest peaks, when it's absolutely a storm, like You know, when May popped open, at least in the Toronto market, for example, we didn't know what hit us. It was like a T-bone in an intersection. Everybody ran for cover. Everybody was scrambling all over the place. And what happened is that a lot of things that we knew we should be doing never got done. The callbacks, the return, the consultations, the leads that just kind of sat in my inbox or in your inbox or in somebody else's inbox that never got answered, right? So you're not only missing on the follow-up, but you're missing, because of that follow-up not happening, filling your pipelines. So that when things kind of settle down, you look at your pipeline, you realize, oh my God, that's now empty. So pumping the well and keeping it going with consistency is going to be the key to all productivity, right? And I think, you know, the other sign that I would add to that would be, maybe some of you have experienced this. Has anybody not enjoyed the sound of their phone when it rings? Yeah. You know that thing that goes ding-a-ling-a-ling or beep, swoosh, bong, whatever it makes, and you're like, oh my God. One more person pulls at the fabric of my being and I'm going to lose it, right? So these are the kinds of things that are the sure signs. So let's go to something that's perhaps not so obvious. So number one, you're doing things at night that could be done during the day. So again, you can see what happens is you get busy running around all day. You're doing what you think are the big ticket jobs. And what happens is you get home, you smash down some food, you might even say hello to the wife and kids, but you're quickly running off to the office or your office at home, and you're going to begin tackling things at night until wee hours of the morning to get those details wrapped up that you might otherwise have had done at the office or by somebody on a team. So what happens is you begin to eat into your free time and your family time. And I would say most importantly is that when that occurs, you're actually eating into your brain's real estate, meaning you only have so much capacity. And when you start to tap that capacity limit, you're setting yourself up for a massive challenge. So what I'm saying is look at that as a less than obvious sign of perhaps it's time to make a change towards building out a team. The second one, interestingly enough, is that you're bored and uninspired. So from my personal experience, I find that I'm most jazzed when I'm building something. It might be completely wrong in what I'm building, but the process or the whole goal of building something provides me with energy and juice. But sometimes when you get something built or you get into those, what do you call it, the boring and the mundane routines of everyday, work life. Rich said to me one time, Bill, to be really, really successful at this component of your world, you have to master repetitious boredom. Oh my God. If I have to fill in one more description sheet, glorious 4-bedroom, 2-story, family room, kitchen, dining room, garage sticking out the front, you got to see this one, like all that kind of stuff. That's the repetitious boredom. Installing lock, like all the stuff that we do, right? So if you're constantly bored because you're just doing the same things over and over, you're going to be uninspired. You're not going to be motivated or empowered to do something on any grand scale or build something for yourselves. And you know what? We're here to do things on a big scale, not in terms of showiness, but to really show our true potential to the world. And these are the opportunities where you can get creative, leveraging other people and other systems to provide that gift to the people who are out there. The other thing, number 3, is that you have an underlying desire to grow, meaning you have this ongoing dialogue with yourself saying, I really should get some help. I really should get some help. I don't know where the hell to start, but I should really get some help because I can't hack this. But you know it. And what happens is you start to get into a little bit of a battle between the head and the heart, as we do with many things in our lives. So rationally, we start to think, oh my God, can I afford it? Oh my God, I don't know what to do in terms of building a team. How would I do that? But you know in your gut that you need to do it, right? So you battle yourself. That also leads to some sort of discontent, right? So the idea is, at the end of it, if you can feel or speak to yourself around that underlying desire that you see, I got to make a change. I got to make it better. That's the less obvious sign that you really need to pay attention to your gut and try to pull it off. Number 4, you're experiencing peaks and valleys in your business. So again, we've talked about this, right? We've talked about the idea that your operational practices and therefore your daily behaviors are a complete indication of your productivity. If you are spending time in areas that are less productive, that could be done by other people, not only are you not making the money you should be, But the way I look at it is that you're also billing your company. It's the opportunity cost. So if you're a $200,000 producer, you're going to be worth $100 an hour. So if you're not doing work that's worth $100 an hour, you're billing your company $100 an hour and you're not making $100. So you're actually billing your company $200 an hour. And if you ask yourself the question, how long would my business run if I had to bill it $200 an hour, 8 hours a day, in some cases 7 days a week? How long could it financially sustain itself? For most of us, we'd say we might be done in a week. We might be done in a day. Some of us maybe even half an hour. But the idea I'm getting at is you're experiencing the peaks and valleys in your business because of the inconsistencies in your daily behavior management. You need to be touching the big stuff. Other people need to be touching the other stuff. And that will be a hard and fast rule that we can follow as we move forward in the build out. Okay, the financial signs. The other part of this equation is the money. So to figure out when you need to start thinking about a team, what you want to think of is, well, what would be a key indicator for me to understand that it's time? Well, from a coaching perspective, what we normally see is that when an agent is producing consistently 2 to 3 transactions a month, that's the time to consider bringing on the first team member, which in most cases is an assistant. Now, why is that? At 25 to 35 transactions a year, you can probably keep up with some of the basics. You got some systems in place, but a lot of people have it all in their head. It's not strategically laid out for other people to follow, which is where the curse comes in. But if you bring on an assistant as an example, and guys, I would highly suggest that if you're looking at growth, the assistant is the most critical component to add to your team first. We could do a whole other seminar on assistants and hiring practices and what color to look for and tasks and duties and all that stuff. But I will tell you that is the biggest leveraging point that you can add. So again, depending on your service level, meaning what you're doing for your clientele, at 25 to 35 transactions a year, you're going to be tapped out. So bringing on somebody will allow that to move forward. So that's the first financial sign that it's a good time to grow, is that you're consistently doing the 25 to 35. The other thing to keep in mind in terms of financial signs, you'll see it says there, is that the benchmark for transaction coordination support, meaning an assistant or anybody else, is that it should represent about 10% of your GCI. So if you're a $250,000, $300,000 producer, you have the budget set aside of 10% for administrative support. So call it $25,000 to $30,000. That does not mean you have to go out and hire somebody full-time, but you can bring in somebody part-time. You can use virtual assistants as well. There's a bunch of different models that you can utilize. Is everybody okay? Everybody making sense with this so far? Yeah? Okay, perfect. All right. The idea is you just want to make sure you keep all your expenses within your budget. That's the whole point. So building a team that's right for you, again, we can talk about sizes: small, mid, mega. Small teams, 2 to 3 people. You, an assistant and an agent, you, an assistant and a client care coordinator, however you want. The mid size is roughly between 4 people and 30 people. Again, very designated roles. Everybody has their understanding of how the system functions, what the overall intention and purpose is. And then, of course, you have the mega teams. And we've all heard of different versions of a mega team, where basically what happens is the lead agent no longer sells anything, but all the people underneath are the support, the execution, the listings, the buyer sides, all gets looked after by what's basically a mini brokerage within a brokerage, if you follow that model. So let's look at a few of the typical me to we growth patterns. So this one is your basic pyramid. And I don't want to say that in the negative context of pyramid. But the bottom line is that you're going to go from the top being the team agent or the lead agent, and you can see you build it out as you go down. Whether you go from team agent or lead agent to lead agent and assistant, then lead agent, assistant, buyer agent, and all the way down, you can see the positions as they get added. And that's just your typical hierarchical system. But I want to get into a couple other ones and versions of such so that you can see that there are different ways to do it. So here's one that is effective. So it starts with you as a team leader, which is where you are at the beginning. Then, although it says team manager, that really still means team leader and team administrator, like the chief, who hires an executive assistant. Beyond that, then you can grow out to adding a listing coordinator, a buyer agent, a second buyer agent, if you will, and a client care specialist. So what happens is in this model, you can be the one who still is the rainmaker, the one who sort of still acts as the CEO, where you've got an executive assistant who can execute a bunch of the systems that you've developed and put down on paper more or less as a series of checklists. And then you've got your sales force down below you, along with a client care person that everybody leans on. So that's one. The trick of it is that every single position, no matter what the structure you design, has to have very, very clear job descriptions. So have a look at this next one. So here, we've got the team leader. We've got a client care support person. We've got operational people. We've got inside sales agents. And you will see inside sales agents are traditional, especially with online lead generating mechanisms. So the key is, because when online leads come in, let's face it, they need a lot of nurturing, they need a lot of scrubbing or cleaning or qualifying before they can move on to the hands of the agents who will be servicing them. So if your agents are worth $100 an hour, or you're worth $200 an hour, your time may not be best spent scrubbing internet leads. So that's why people will hire a person to do that. So it could be a salaried position, it could be a commission-based position, it could be that you pay them on their success of basically parking an appointment for one of your teammates. But there's lots of different variables that come off of this. But the reality is it has to be very clear job responsibilities for each and every position. So I'm a big believer in productivity through efficiency. So for those of you who know the green or the color wheel, as a green, which I am, that's my mind always thinks about the most efficient model to get to somewhere. So to tack onto this me to we structure, I'll explain to you sort of my current structure that I use, because I've had a team as big as 5 or 6, blew it up down to 3, down to 4, down to 2, back to 2, like all over the place. The current structure now is that I have myself as a team lead, I have a full-time administrator, and I have 4 overflow agents. So I predominantly work with my own database, my lifetime referral system. My assistant essentially executes almost 100% of the tasks, and everything else that she cannot handle as a skill set gets pushed out to people who are in that skill set. Like I have 2 creative people, and we've got other people who do IT, other people who do website work, so we don't fiddle with that on the inside. The reason being, again, is because I know my role as the rainmaker. I hope that what happens is, from today's talk, is that you identify what your role needs to be. So what I would suggest before we switch over into a couple questions I'm going to ask you is I want you to think about doing this as an exercise, especially for those people who don't yet have an assistant. I want you guys to grab a pad of paper or a sheet of paper, and as an exercise, I have my coaching clients do is I have them write out absolutely every single task that you do during the course of a day, a week, or a month that has to do with running your business. And literally, I mean, just barf it out. Do not filter it. Do not disguise it. Do not play any mental gymnastics with ourselves. Just write it all out. Once that's done, take a highlighter, and I'm going to get you to highlight 2 categories of tasks. One is going to be highlight the ones that you absolutely love to do, meaning you're in your absolute sweet spot when you do it. It's not work. It's kind of like play, if you will. The other ones that you highlight are the ones that generate you your dollar per hour value. So to quickly calculate your dollar per hour value, you take your gross commission income for the year and divide it by 2,000 hours, because that's basically a 9 to 5 kind of window the average Joe works, even though I know we work more, but it gives you a rough idea. And if any of the tasks that are on that list, if you're not willing to pay somebody that number, then the question becomes, why are you paying you? Why are you doing it? Because if it's a $100 an hour job, but it could be done by an assistant who you can pay $20 an hour to, that's how the leveraging model works, which is why the assistant becomes so important. For those of you who already have assistants, excuse me, or an additional teammate, run this exercise through with them, as well as yourself. Eliminate any duplication on either of the lists or all of the lists between you so that there's no redundancy, because that's a waste of efficiency and therefore productivity. And ask them to highlight their favorite tasks. Ask them to highlight the ones that are dollar productive, and the stuff that's left over is the junk we just don't want to handle, then that's your calling to figure out who to delegate it to who will pull that off for you. Or do I need to hire somebody to pull that off? Or do I need to outsource it to someone to pull that off? Because think about this, and again, this is a leverage position with the team. If you could spend every moment of your waking business day only doing what you needed to do to generate your $200, $300, $400, $500 an hour return on investment, I might bet that you would be a lot happier. Especially knowing you got other people who are all on board, all for the same cause, all going for the same thing. Okay, so we're going to go to a Q&A. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a couple of questions, which I have on my handy dandy cards here, and I want you guys to kind of chime in on the chat to the response of these two questions. So we're going to take about the next 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. So question number 1 I want to ask you is, outside of the advantages that I pointed out, what other advantages do you see in the decision to grow a team? Meaning, what do you see as the advantage? Accountability, yeah, momentum, yeah. Yeah, free time. Yeah, fantastic, you guys. Fantastic. So have a look at your chat as it moves, guys. Look at all these answers that the idea of building out a team will provide. That is unbelievable. Thank you very much for doing that. You guys are fantastic. Weekends for family and friends. Doesn't that seem like an elusive dream for some people? Amazing. So I want you to copy this. You can download the chat. Our guys may be able to send it to you as well. But these are the things I want you to have handy when you're deliberating over whether or not you should grow. Because I know it's a scary step. For those people who don't have anybody, it's just you, I know it's a scary step. You worry about commitment, you worry about money, you worry about where your next deal is going to come. You might have had a great year this year, but I know I'm an agent for almost 30 years. Every time the awards or the January comes along, what do we always think? Oh my God, I have to do this again. Can I do it? Yes, you can do it. If you strategically build it. Start with the assistant. And look at all these great things that happen as a result of doing that. And trust me, it works. So great job, guys. That's fantastic. Okay, question number 2. What do you see getting in the way of your growth plan? So what do you see getting in the way? What's going to interrupt that? And let's, myself, oh my God, fear. Myself and fear. 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 Letting go. Probably fear-based. Fear. You guys are awesome. Awesome. Okay, unbelievable. Unbelievable. So I want to help you with overcoming some of the fear, because I was a chicken when I first started. Chicken. I mean, I'm talking full feathers, beak, the whole deal. Always around money. The ability to sort of put my faith in other people to do a job that if I had control of, I knew was up to me, my responsibility. And I learned years ago one of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself. And I'm sorry I can't see everybody's faces on the chat, but I'm going to ask you this right now, and all I want you to do is raise your hands. The question you want to ask yourself with anything in your life, not just building a team, when you know that the reluctance is fear-based, just ask yourself this question. What would I do if I wasn't afraid? So now, let's put it directly to this question about a build-out. By show of hands, if you weren't having to be afraid of anything, how many of you would build out a team of whatever that might look like, an assistant or more agents or just whatever? How many of you would build something if you had no fear? Yeah, amazing. Amazing. For sure. So here's what I want to show you with that question, is that if you could ask yourself, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? The answer you give to yourself is in fact the true answer. If you said, hell yeah, I'd build a team. that is the right thing to do. Try to keep the fear in perspective. It's keeping us all small, right? I know you guys can do all this. So what I want you to do is take some notes down from the chat of what we've just gone through. If you have any other questions, you can fire them into the chat, because what will probably happen is that somebody will see them, and eventually what we'll try to do is get full circle on some of them to get back to you with some answers. But at this stage of the game, I think we're getting close to wrapping up. So I want to thank you guys very, very much for letting me speak with you this afternoon. I hope you found that there was some value in our conversation. And of course, if you need any help with any of the questions or whatever, feel free to reach out at any time. I'm more than happy to talk with you guys through the logistics or through any part of the team build exercise. And I wish you all good health and an awesome 2021. So let's just punch it out.